Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, who, before it was stolen from them, were the owners of the land on which this art gallery stands. An extra warm welcome to you if this is your first time tuning in to Art After Hours Online. My name is Yumi Stynes. Now, Art After Hours Online is a weekly talk series where you'll hear artists, thinkers, inspiring people, celebrities in conversation as they explore themes and artworks from the exhibitions that are currently on display in the gallery. Now, this week we are exploring the new exhibition. I'm sitting in it. I'm breathing it in. It's Real World's Dobell Australian Drawing Biennial 2020. The exhibition presents the work of 8 contemporary, still active Australian artists who create extraordinary new worlds through the art of drawing. Now, if you're watching this live on a Wednesday night, a big shout out to you for turning down the volume on the US election results and allowing your spirit to open up and enjoy something that is actually going to feed it, not suck it dry. So tonight we're joined by 2 of the artists in the exhibition, who are Jack Stahel and Helen Wright. Now, let me introduce a little bit about those people. Helen Wright is a multidisciplinary artist who trained in Hobart and in Sydney. She lectured at the Tasmanian School of Art and the Uni of Tasmania and was a founding member of the Chameleon Studios and Contemporary Art Space in Hobart. Welcome, Helen.
Oh, hello.
So good to see you, and I'm so excited to talk to you. And I'd like to introduce our other guest tonight, Jack Stahel, who won the Tim Olsen Drawing Prize in 2012 and completed a Master of Fine Art at UNSW Art and Design School in 2015. And at 31, is the youngest artist in this exhibition. Congratulations and welcome. Thanks for talking to us tonight. Now, Helen, I'm going to start with you. I want to know, we've seen your artwork. It's called Scrap Stack, Free Fall in the Age of Stupid. Amazing artwork. What is your process of selecting images to draw?
In this particular drawing, I've taken recognisable objects from Bunnings catalogues. I've been particularly interested in the consumer world, and I have selected various objects from the absolute sort of amazing repertoire of things that come into your vision at Bunnings. And what I do is I get the Bunnings catalogues, and I take the objects that I'm particularly interested in, and I put them through a process of editing and transforming. And through that, I use Photoshop and a little bit of old stuff like photocopying as well to play with scale quite easily. And I use things like Spherize and Shear and Free Transform and things like that, just to get the objects that I'm particularly interested into a form, to transform them to something that that I feel I'm ready to actually work with. So. I'm transforming my source material, and then I'm ready to work. And from that point, I leave the digital. I'm not interested in it in any way at all, and because for me, drawing's pretty much strictly, it's an analogue process, and that's the way I respond to it. I love the physicality of it. I like to hear the scratchiness of the graphite on the paper, or to feel that sort of gutsy charcoal physicality if I'm working with a different medium, stuff like that. I really love paper. I love to work on paper because I find it one of the most resilient and most forgiving of surfaces, and just is transformative and really just very, very free to explore your ideas about the world through drawing.
Sure. I love that idea of the scratching sound that it actually makes while the graphite is being dragged across a beautiful, pristine piece of paper. Jack, I want to talk to you about that process of drawing. So we've seen your amazingly intricate drawings here at the Dobell Australian. They're multitudinous, and they're also paired up with sculptures. So it's more of an installation than just like what for instance, our dads might imagine a drawing exhibition to be. So they're in cabinets, some of these sculptures, and there are accompanying drawings on the walls. Can you help us understand the process and how this qualifies as drawing?
Sure. So yeah, process is really key here, and I see this whole installation essentially as one drawing. It's made up of smaller drawings. Some of them are sculptural. I still see them as drawings, and that's because the process is really key for me. A drawing isn't just a result, it's not just an object, it's actually a process in itself, it's actually an experience in itself as well. So when I'm drawing, I'm experiencing the drawing, as Helen touched upon too. She loves the way that scratching, and that's all part of that process there.
Can I know you've got a whole lot of thoughts ahead of this.
Stop me rambling.
But there's a bit here that I really just want to open up for people watching. And by the way, if you're watching it and you want to ask a question, type one in, and if it's a good one, I'll get somebody to write it down on a piece of paper and give it to me old school analog style, piece of paper, pencil, the whole thing. I'd love to hear from you. And by the way, we do see all the comments you make as well, and we love them. They keep the feeling of it being a live event happening for us, so please keep that coming. One thing that I got from you when we were chatting before was about how you were a compulsive drawer during school. You were one of those kids that was always in class doing something that the teacher didn't want you to do.
Absolutely.
But it was the process, which is what you were kind of talking about just now, the process of the pen on the paper or the pencil on the paper.
It's been a driving impetus for my practice my whole life, yeah, for sure. Trying to understand why it is that I do that.
It's like a foot tapping or a need to do.
There's like obvious things that calms me down and it's good for my mental health and things like that, but also just, why?
So coming back to your artwork here, which is called Unified Theory of Itself. So are you trying to explain that you can't create an exhibition like that without drawing it first?
I'm trying to, I guess, explain the experience of making this artwork in the artwork itself. It's
very meta.
It's very meta, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
It's confusing, it needs to be confusing. It's a confusing topic.
So when we talk about process, do you follow certain processes the same as Helen?
Yeah, absolutely. So every drawing, maybe it's a good way, you could almost call them experiments. Every drawing I'm approaching it with a slightly different process. And that is the more important thing for me than what is actually. So the question that you asked Helen before, I was going to have difficulty answering because people will come and see my work, especially friends and family, and they'll say, what is it? And my answer is often, it's a drawing, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, it's really kind of the best answer because I'm not really looking to draw something in particular. I'm looking to have a process of that particular drawing and for the result to be showing what that process was.
I think that leads well to my next question for you, Helen. How do you want people to experience your drawings?
I would like them to be immersed in, particularly in these works, to be immersed, perhaps even confused by the overwhelming number of things falling and sort of the lack of logic in it, I think, so I would like them to be immersed in and captivated by the experience that I've provided for them of watching something, as far as I'm concerned, in free fall, in that sort of state of collapse, which the big work certainly has. So yes, I'm trying to get people to really see all sorts of things and come to places within the drawing and be surprised and what's that doing there, and yeah, be immersed in the lack of logic in the face of
mission accomplished. Love it.
So one of the things, so just to explain, because the exhibition's only just freshly launched, your exhibition, Helen, your artwork is two pieces that are related. The first is the stack of scrap, and then the second is the bigger piece where they do seem to be free falling. If you step in closer and have a look, is that where the Bunnings catalogue can kind of see its echoes?
Where you can see the objects.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you will come to anything from, you know, hammers to ladders to little bits of screws and little bits of crazy pipe, and you know, it's all there in this sort of mishmash of chaos in a sense, which probably, if you imagine Bunnings collapsing, that's where you would go. You couldn't avoid that.
I noticed all the objects falling are human-made.
Yes, yeah. Most of the work it's architectural and sort of what could be construed as junk objects, or could be construed as essential. Things that you find this sort of thing when you at Bunnings. You find a range of everything from the essential, which is why you went there in the first place, right through to this extraordinary, bizarre collection of things that you can't imagine that anybody would ever want. But of course, no, they do.
Totally.
And that's why they're there, because they're, you know, they're consumable. People do want them.
In common, I found between Helen Wright's artwork and Jack Stahl's artwork was a certain fastidiousness and also a randomness. Would you agree with that, Jack?
Fastidiousness, absolutely.
Yeah.
Randomness, not so much.
So when I wish that you would come and see this exhibition, because you need to see Jack's artwork up close, where you can kind of peer into these cabinets and have a look at what's on display. Tiny objects, I think a lot of them were made from a glue gun.
I use the glue gun to stick a lot of things together, and then I also use it to draw and create extra lines and things with the sculptures as well, yeah.
Arranged very fastidiously, as though there is an inherent logic that will help us to understand the world.
Yep. And I can see how you would think that there's a random element too, and I did too, you know, when earlier in my career, before I understood my practice a lot better. You know, I use words like, you know, organic or automatic drawing, like super early on. It's a big no-no to talk about that now. But I realized over time that it's really not that random at all, because I've just dedicated my life to becoming an expert at drawing the way that I draw. And it's built up, you know, it's years of habit now. So to talk aesthetically about, you know, just one drawing, for instance, you know, there's sort of an element there that I'm using my own sort of perception skills and how people are looking at images to actually form the image itself. So if you think of maybe like constellations and humans creating patterns, and, you know, there's some dots here and then they join them together. I'm doing these tiny dots. If I just did one dot, it's pretty much imperceptible. Yep. But building it up over time, I'm just sort of letting my brain connect the dots while I'm actually drawing. So it seems somewhat random, but it's really based in a lot of habit, which then leads to expertise. And expertise is a thing where once you have expertise in something, your brain is free to think about other parts of what you're doing. So yes, it comes quite natural to me now, and I can write out, you know, the little characters I do, I can just write them out without really having to think about it. but not so random. It's built up sort of habit.
Right. I watched an Instagram video that you posted of the dot, the pen sort of hitting the paper and many, many dots slowly building up a drawing, and I did realise the immense skill that is involved in what you do. It's very illuminating, but it's also incredibly time consuming. So
Yes.
Where is your head when you're doing that?
It's a good question, and it's kind of all over the place. It's very meditative, and a lot of artists will talk about a flow state. It's generally the term that's sort of won out in terms of how people talk about that state. There's a lot of other names for it, but essentially, it's a hyper-focused state, and you can completely lose track of time. I can easily draw for 10, 12 hours and not really know that much time has passed.
Crazy.
In fact, actually, I really need to do that, because if I only draw for an hour or two, the work would never get done.
And do you listen to anything while you're doing that?
Yeah, sometimes music, sometimes nothing at all. I listen to podcasts and things as well.
Helen, does this sound like your practice where you hit a flow?
At times, yeah. I mean, you've got to. You need to be totally seduced by your process and to block out anything else to actually make things work.
It's when all the best stuff happens.
Yeah. I do tend to listen to the radio. I'm, again, old world, and so I've got a lot of information coming through various programs. I like to listen to programs about literature and the book reading programs and things like that. I listen to the music programs, usually in the ABC, but when I really know that I'm in a tussle with my drawing, and a drawing as large as mine that evolved in the way that it did, there were a lot of tussles happening to get it under control or to lose it in, and then to wrestle it back again and things like that. So I had to. I couldn't listen to anything at all in that at that point. I just really had to have concentration and to really nut out where within the composition the next area that I would go to, and how all those things were interacting with one another, which, as you can imagine, was quite a feat.
Quite a puzzle. I absolutely can imagine. Helen, you used the word tussle a couple of times. It sounds like you're physically grappling with an artwork, and at times it may dominate you. Yes,
I was. It was wrestling at times. I mean, writers talk about being in that sort of state as well. I think I should imagine it's just part of the creative process that people at a professional level would certainly feel that they needed to be in to resolve a work and come out the other end with something that you're incredibly not proud of, but that you really identify with and want to put your name on, really, I think. Yeah.
I'm curious what happens when the picture wins the fight.
You probably turn. I tend to turn them to the wall, so I can't look at them for a long time.
Yeah. And
then I think, all right, I'll turn you over and see if you're as bad as I thought you were,
and also it can't look at you at the same time.
There are casualties in the drawing process.
I bet. I did ask if anybody wanted to ask a question. This is live if you're watching on a Wednesday night, the night that everybody's losing their minds over the US election results. Christine has got in contact, and you've still got time to if you want to. She's got a question for both of you. I'll start with you though, Jack. How has COVID affected your process of drawing, if at all?
So interestingly, gearing up to work on this project, I knew I had a huge amount of work to do, and I was so excited to get started on it. My own sort of personal lockdown actually started a little bit before the lockdown here. It was sort of more like February than March. So I was already squirreled away in my studio at the time that the lockdown started. I think certainly it helped not being able to go out to just keep working away. But likewise, at the other end, when the lockdown was lifted, I was still very much in my own lockdown, which was kind of a weird experience as my friends started to go back out and things, and I was sort of like, oh, but this isn't over for me yet. So that was quite a weird thing. But in terms of my process and practice, it didn't really have much of an impact, actually, because I would have been doing it either way.
How about you, Helen?
Similarly to Jack, I didn't really have, it didn't really seem to disrupt my routine because I share the studio with my husband, and and we basically just came to the studio as our place of work and stayed and did what we would normally do, a routine during the day. That's when I wasn't working and Zooming with my students. So it felt oppressive, I think, at points, mainly because you felt you couldn't go outside you could only go 5 kilometres outside where you lived, and so that seemed to be quite oppressive. But it didn't. In terms of the work, it didn't change much at all. I was obsessively working in the studio, keeping to the normal sort of routines of the day, really. Take the dog for a walk in the morning.
One of the things that I've found from speaking to creative people and people who aren't creative is that often creative people were like, I've realised that I'm doing the right thing with my life. And uncreative people were like, what am I doing with my life? That was the reaction or the thought triggered by COVID. So I'm in a room right now. It's the Dobell Australian Biennial drawing exhibition. It's just started at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. There are 8 artists. I'm talking to only 2 of them, but if you look around the room, there are bright coloured artworks, there are sculptures, there's installations, there's sort of 3D objects that you can interact with. It's really quite an experience. And it's unified under the idea of the theme, real worlds. Now, part of what I think we were asked to do, Helen, was use art to help us understand the real world. Can you help us understand how you took that theme and incorporated it into your artwork?
I think through drawing, I think I've tried to apply and to interrogate that idea on that theme, because it's drawing the real world. It's a way of exploring all the ideas that I might have about the real world, all that feeder information that comes in, which is, enormous and overpowering and overwhelming, and then trying in some way to make sense of it, and coming out the other end having created a drawing that's probably acknowledges that it doesn't make sense in some ways. So I think it's a way of filtering and filtering the information that's coming in from outside, which is a real world, and then having a little dialogue with myself about what's real, and what should go in, what I would take to make a real world. Yeah.
Jack.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes beautiful sense, and I love to picture us all as filters in some way. Maybe what comes out might not be a drawing or an artwork, but in some way we're filtering the world, the real worlds. Jack, your practice is often about imaginary science. And experiencing the installation, experiencing the way that the drawings kind of relate to them, it does very much feel like this is a key that might unlock something very useful if I could just figure it out. Is that sort of what you're going for? Absolutely. And I use this sort of umbrella term, imaginary science, because I'm interested in so many different things and they're somewhat nebulous. It kind of confuses the artwork, and there's a tendency in the art, there's less is more. If I just had one or two of these drawings, everyone would have gone up to those drawings and noticed more of the detail and things. And so I understand that and how that works in an art setting. But I'm kind of happy for some people to maybe gloss over some of those details to include all the other things. And I use this imaginary science term because nobody ever says in science, less is more. They always want more information. Right. More, So hang on, so in the art world, people want you to be more minimalist. They want you to pare it back, and for good reason. But I'm just not interested in doing that because I think it's way more interesting to put more out there. Yep. The more you put there, the more connections there are between the things. And I'm interested in those connections itself, yeah. Do you ever wonder, like, maybe you'll wake up as a 60-year-old and you'll actually realise there is an inherent logic to everything that you've made? Oh, I already realised that. Yes. Oh, really? What does it all mean then? Explain it to us. So it's very difficult to put into a nutshell. Yeah. But what I would say is that I'm really obsessed with the brain and my own experience of my brain versus how scientists tell me my brain works, which are never going to actually conflate together. My experience of my own brain, no one's ever going to be able to tell me about that, right? And the creative process itself, I've realized in the way that I've just been working through this creative process over many years, that the creative process itself is actually writing ourselves. So all this time I was making these works thinking that I was going to get to the bottom of why I did this, but actually realized in the end that I emerged from doing this. The creative process actually created me rather than the creative process understanding me. Okay, I like it. Helen, before we have to go, I just want to just get a little bit of the moments of inspiration that strike you like bolts of lightning. It seems to me that as an artist, you're very receptive. Totally. Yeah. And so at times, at quite random times, inspiration or something can strike you and you have to capture it. Can you help us to kind of visualize what happens to you when you see something and you've got to use it? Oh, it's you just go, oh yeah, that's it. I'm going to take a photo of that. I'm going to record that somehow. I know that is going to work in some way. That's part of the component within the whole scheme of things around. I mean, it might be just a pattern on a brick wall, a pattern of things on a wall at a service station or something like that. But you think, oh, that what an amazing detail that is, that I can use that. It is like a bolt of lightning because it seems to have fallen into place. You've been extremely lucky to have come across that, or you've never noticed it before, and there it is in front of you, and you just know that's it. So, yeah, that's my little moment of light bulb, yeah. I love it, and I want to breathe it in, and I want to share it around. It's just, feeding off artists' inspiration is very inspiring for the rest of us mere mortals. Thank you so much for joining us today. Helen and Jack, it has been an absolute delight. I feel like I've learnt so much, and my experience of the exhibition will be much richer for it. The gallery is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. Now, to come and see this particular exhibition, you don't need a ticket and you don't need to pre-book. It's free. Just walk in. It's the Dobell Australian Drawing Biennial, and it's also part of the general collection. But if you do want to see the Archibald, Wynne and Sulman prizes, you will need to pre-book and get a ticket. See the gallery's website for details. After Hours Online is supported by Macquarie University and the Art Gallery Society of New South Wales. Next week, celebrating NAIDOC Week with a talk on the 2020 theme, Always Was, Always Will Be. My name's Yumi Stynes. Thank you so much for tuning in.